So there's a bit of scene setting we've got to do. We've got some introduction slides that I think Rich is going to share that we're going to take you through, just to kind of give a little bit of context. Obviously, we're here to talk about the circular economy, and the way we're going to structure that is we're going to be doing some quick introductions, a bit of who we are, why we're here, and why this particular topic matters to us so much. And then we are going to be handing over to the wonderful Carmen, who is joining us today from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who is going to be giving some of her fantastic insights as experts in this particular space. Before I get you all introduced to the marvellous panel that have been chit-chatting about the weather, but they have some fantastic expertise in this particular space, and really excited to have a conversation with them, hear about their experiences and share some of their insights from that. There will be an opportunity for questions at the end, so please do use that Q&A channel. Please populate that as we go through. If there's opportunities to incorporate your questions as we move through in the discussion, I will do my very best, but please all be aware we will leave time at the end to get through those questions that you have, so please do pop them in there. Right, so quick introductions, who we are, why we do this. So I'm Gabby, I head up commercial here at Three-Sided Cube. For those of you that don't know, we are a software development agency. We're based on the south coast of England in a place called Bournemouth, which is why we're talking about it being rather chilly today. And we are a mission-led organisation, and our mission is to change millions of lives for the better. It's what motivates us here at Three-Sided Cube and what all the teams sign up for when they join the Cube family. We achieve that mission by building tech for good, because technology is a super powerful tool that has the potential for huge impact and reach. But the technology itself is agnostic. The technology doesn't care if it's used for good or for bad. So we choose the organizations that we work with, who we align with, making sure they align with that important mission of ours. We align with organizations that have that expertise, that knowledge, that audience, and importantly, the reach to develop projects where technology can be used as a really key resource to enable more impact and ultimately deliver real positive change to people's lives. So being in the for good world, our team is extremely passionate about protecting people and our planet. And really that's what led us here today, talking to you and obviously being joined by a wonderful panel about particularly the circular economy. Before we dive into chatting to our panel and our wonderful guests today, I'm going to hand over to our MD, Rich, who's also here with me today. He's going to touch on what the circular economy is and actually just talk a little bit more about why we're so passionate to cover this topic with you today.
Cheers, Gabs. Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly the circular economy is something that's very close to our hearts at Three-Sided Cube. We've been working in it and around it now for the last 4 years, I think it is. So just very quickly, as a primer for anybody that's not aware when we say the circular economy, what it is. And I'm kind of, given the caliber of the people that are that we've got on the panel, I'm a bit low to show this because this is very much a simplistic view of it. But as a kind of real overview of what the circular economy is, the linear economy is where we take, we make, and we dispose. So that's the way the world has worked for quite a long time now, kind of since sort of the Industrial Revolution. We've taken resources from the planet, we create something with them, we sell them to people, and then we throw those things away, and then we take again. And that is obviously has a whole load of waste attached to that. What the circular economy tries to do is close that loop. So we create things, we make them, we use them, and then we recycle them. That's a very simplistic view of it, and as I said, given the caliber of the people that are going to be talking after this, I think it's you know, it is, but it's a very easy, simplistic way of understanding what we mean when we're talking about the circular economy. It's reducing our waste and reducing our impact on the planet. The reason it's a hugely kind of important thing to Three-Sided Cube, I guess, is worth just briefly touching on. Our first foray into this was actually a project that we worked on, as I said, about 4 years ago was the first time we started speaking to some guys around this in the recycling world. And we worked with them on a pilot they were running to see if they could, they're a packaging labeling company. called Polytag, and they were looking at to see whether we could track individual plastic bottles, it was at that point, through the value chain. So the idea was that somebody produced a plastic bottle, put their drink in it, you used the drink, you recycled the bottle, and the bottle got back to that manufacturer. That was our first kind of view on it, which again was that circle. It wasn't an issue that we particularly felt at Cube. You know, we understood there was a problem there. What we didn't realise was the issues around recycling. And actually, we all thought, well, you know, I put my recycling in the recycling bin, it gets recycled. I pat myself on the back. What a great job! I'm doing my bit. What's the problem? What we didn't realise was there was at that point only about between 12 and 14% of anything you recycle actually gets recycled, and a lot of it ends up in the bin, into landfill, or gets put on a boat and shipped to another country to get put into landfill because it's not our problem and we treat that as recycling. So that was a real kind of shock to us. We thought we were pretty responsible people that understood what we were doing. So that sent us on a bit of a journey to understand exactly what was going on in this world, which really got us into that circular economy world that we're going to be exploring more during the next hour. But we were so kind of blown away by it that it actually, we decided that we needed to do something about it. Now, we are, as Gabby said, a software company, and we've had various bits of success with the applications we've produced, and we were like, we'll build an app that will solve it. So we set to work looking at how we would build an app to solve the problems of the circular economy and fix all this. And it turns out that an app's really not going to be the solution for that. There's no way that an app development company on their own are going to be able to have the kind of impact that's required to shift the world that we live in the right direction. So then what we decided to do was, okay, we can't do it on our own. What we want to do is find a community of like-minded individuals who are going to be able to help us on that journey. So we set up Ignite. Ignite is something that we do of our own volition. And what we're slowly doing over time is building that community of people that can work together to help to find the issues that are solutions to the issues that are faced when we're trying to move to a more circular economy. Because it isn't just one thing. As I said, it's design, it's a little bit of technology, there's a whole lot of policy, there's brand, there's public awareness, it's a huge undertaking. And what you need to do it is to get a lot of right-minded and like-minded individuals together to try and crack that. We do think it's crackable. We do chunks of research that sort of support that. So our last piece of research we did, we uncovered the what's called the intention action gap. So when we were speaking to consumers, we knew that there's a big drive out there for people to act on their intentions. And there's a lot of people that are very well-meaning, but actually don't then follow through on it. So that is about 17.5 million people out there. It's about 35% of the adult population who are keen to behave in the right way, but don't know how to, or don't behave in the right way. And when we looked at that, there's stuff like cost was an issue. The choices aren't practical. They can't find the sustainable options when they're making the purchases. So there's a real drive to do it, but people don't understand how. So it's kind of interesting to us that it's not just a consumer thing. This backs up the fact that we've got to give them opportunities and give them the options to do it and make it more available to them. And that's going to be done through exciting, fun startups. It's going to be done through manufacturing. It's got to be done through the whole supply chain. But it's not going to be done by just shouting at consumers and telling them they've got to be better all the time. That's unfortunately a bit too much of a blunt. Eyes going and going and checking that out on TED. But you can see from this kind of diagram that there's a whole load of different parts of the economy that's involved in changing this. But I'm going to stop there because we've got somebody who's probably much better placed to talk about this kind of thing than I am. So I'm going to hand over now to Carmen, who is going to tell us a little bit more about the Ellen MacArthur's view on the circular economy.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Rich. And it's great to be here today. Hi, everyone. Love to see the butterfly diagram. It's always, it's very close to our heart. Just for a bit of, I guess, detail on what the two sides of the butterfly diagram represent. The blue side is basically the technical materials, and the green side are biological materials, so food, biomass, and so on. And we do treat them a little bit differently. But before I delve into the content of today's talk, just by way of introduction, I'm Carmen. I'm a project manager at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I oversee our work on climate change. And if you haven't heard of the foundation, just by way of introduction, we are a charity that is based from out of the Isle of Wight in the south of England. We are a team of a little under 200 people, and we have a few offices globally in Beijing, in Sao Paulo in Brazil, in New York City, Brussels, and also a work stream and a few collaborations with different organizations in Africa. We were set up a little over a decade ago, and our mission all along has been to accelerate the transition to the circular economy. And we do that by working with a wide range of actors, private companies, both multinationals, but also innovators, startups, scale-ups, universities, international institutions like the UN and the European Commission, city governments, national governments, and really everyone, because we want to embed the circular economy in both policy and private sector strategies and practices. We have a few programs that focus on specific materials. So we have a program that looks at plastic packaging. We also have a program that works with textiles, another one that works on food. And we also have cross-cutting programs that look at the levers that we think need to be present in every single sector of the economy to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And those include design, policy, and finance. And all of these activities are underpinned by our learning activities. And that's probably the most longstanding activity that the foundation has engaged in since its beginnings in 2010. We have organized all sorts of courses and workshops for different levels of proficiency in the circular economy in collaboration with schools, universities, but also the private sector, so for all types of learners. And I encourage you, if you haven't had the chance to do so yet, to go to our website, but also to our YouTube channel, because quite a lot of our learning content is actually free and available to the public. Now, onto the topic of today. Rich has presented a very brief definition of the circular economy, and just to build a little bit on that, I'm going to share my screen. I only have 2 slides for you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Perfect. Okay. Well, so what we understand through a circular economy at the foundation is an economy that's based on 3 principles, and those are to design out waste and pollution, to circulate or keep materials in use, and to regenerate natural systems. And of course, these principles will take life and take different shapes when you apply them to different economic activities, but we find it really important to flesh them out because the circular economy is often confused with recycling or materials efficiency. And while we acknowledge that those are very important parts of a circular economy and they're not without their challenges, and Rich just outlined a few of them, to us, what the circular economy is really is a way of thinking and a way of redesigning products and the systems in which they're exchanged with the aim of decoupling economic value generation from the use of virgin raw materials. That's really what it is. To us, the circular economy is very much a design challenge. It's about going upstream to the source of the problem, because if your intervention point is where you go to try and recycle something, the impact that you can have is pretty limited. And also, if products haven't been designed for recycling, then you're going to struggle a lot to recycle them. And of course, technological innovation plays a very key role in underpinning the transition to a circular economy. And I'll take a few minutes to walk you through a few examples of how I see this playing out, bearing in mind the fact that I'll be followed by a lineup of really interesting entrepreneurs who will talk about their own activities. But of course, the first, area that I wanted to look at was digital innovation. And when we sit down and talk to people working in different sectors of the economy, it becomes immediately apparent the fact that a lot of the time, the reason why people don't reuse or recycle materials and products is because they don't know what's in them. So they don't know if they're safe, they don't know if they're durable, they don't know if they'll work. So they just throw them away, essentially. So that's where digitally enabled materials passports or materials inventories come into play. And I wanted to highlight the work of a German startup called Modaster that does that in the construction sector. If you work with construction materials, you might know that a lot of the times construction and demolition waste is downcycled. It's used for backfilling roads and what have you, for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. So what Modaster is trying to do is build materials passports, which are basically inventories that you store digitally and that travel with a particular building or project as it changes hands, right, in the value chain, so that when the owner decides at some point to deconstruct or demolish, which is not ideal, a particular project, they know what materials they can work with and they can make more informed decisions about what to do with them. So digital innovation is the first, area of tech that I wanted to highlight. The other one that I wanted to highlight was, of course, materials innovation. And I think many of you on this call are probably familiar with, the incredible strides that have been made in replacing some of the fossil fuel-based materials in cleaning products and plastics and so on with bio-based ones. But one example that we really like at the foundation is a Californian startup called Appeal. And what they do is basically they make this edible coating for produce, for fruit and vegetables. And we find this to be, it's a spray. So you don't need to use any plastic, no cucumbers wrapped in plastic, no nothing. It's just an edible spray. We find this to be a really beautiful solution because, going back to what I was saying earlier, it goes to the source of the problem. It rethinks and reinvents how things are done. It doesn't seek to incrementally change the packaging a little bit, substitute some of the substances in it. It just completely changes how things are done. And in the process, it eliminates tens of thousands of tons of plastic waste and prolongs the shelf life of produce, thus helping to reduce food waste, which you probably all know is a source of greenhouse gas emissions and so on. So really beautiful solution here that I wanted to highlight. But not to curb tech enthusiasm, but one thing that I wanted to mention is, of course, the fact that no technology and no solution comes without its adverse effects. And, as we look to technology to enable the transition to a circular economy, I think we need to be mindful of the fact that there will be new challenges that we'll need to deal with as we adopt these solutions at scale. And if I were to, give an example here, it would be the transition to electric mobility. Many of you might know that, EV battery packs, so like lithium ion batteries, are at the moment very difficult to recycle. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't transition to to electric vehicles, but it does mean that we need to figure out a way to better design those batteries, because if we don't, we're setting ourselves up for a scenario in which in a decade's time, we're going to have mountains of EV battery packs sitting in our landfills. And of course, there are issues there with the sourcing of the metals that go into these batteries and so on. So, you know, we need to be mindful in this transition to new technologies about their impacts. Another thing that I wanted to highlight is the fact that in order to transition to a circular economy, we need more than just tech innovation. We need to innovate how we work together and how we operate as a society. So we need business innovation and we need social innovation, really. And again, here we are seeing really promising developments. For example, in supply chain management, a lot of corporates that we work with are trying to reduce their scope 3 emissions. And you know, in so doing, they're beginning to realize that actually they need to change a little bit how they work with their suppliers, and they need to move away from the more established transactional kind of relationships to more longer term partnerships, and perhaps provide things like technical and financial support to their suppliers to change how they do things. So patient capital, patient investment, and so on. That's another really important area that I wanted to highlight. And lastly, before I give the floor to the panel, I just wanted to kind of, you know, summarize a little bit and highlight the fact that in our understanding of the foundation, the circular economy is not an end in and of itself, so much as it is a means to an end and a framework, a way of thinking to address some of the leading environmental challenges of our time: climate change, biodiversity loss, waste, pollution, while still generating economic value. So that's really what it is. And if I were to, you know, I guess thinking about the future, if I were to look to you know, guess or actually express a hope as to where we're going with this circular economy, my hope would be that we will drop the circular from the economy, and that the circular economy as a way of thinking will just become the go-to, the norm, and it will just become embedded in our overall economy. We won't need to qualify it in any way. But that's it from me for now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Carmen. That was amazing. A really wonderful scene setting and a really powerful message to end on. So I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time speaking about anything, I'm just going to dive straight into getting you all acquainted with our wonderful panelists who, as Carmen has mentioned, have got some really amazing insights from working in the industry themselves. So just at this point, I just wanted to kind of put that reminder out about the Q&A. So if you can pop your questions that you have throughout this conversation in the Q&A channel, what I will do is I will make sure they are raised with the wonderful panelists to get those answered for you. I'm just flagging, there is a power cut going on around me. So I am hanging on very, very strongly with a hot spotting off my phone. So apologies in advance if I go dark or anything goes wrong, but in true virtual event style, it wouldn't be a virtual event without something. So yeah, if we could kick off and get everyone whizzing around with some introductions, that would be amazing. Joey, you are top of my screen, so can you kick us off, please?
Hey everyone, my name is Joey Pringle and I'm the owner of Vishin Factory. So Vishin is a factory in the fashion sector that specializes in luxury women's handbags and accessories. The business is based in China, and the company is built on a foundation of 5 core values: sustainability, transparency, plant-based culture, giving back, and most importantly, meditation and wellness. Right now, I'm currently in Costa Rica, where I'm looking at expanding our company from China into Costa Rica to have a second factory. And it's lovely to be here.
Awesome, lovely to have you here, thank you. Connor, you're next.
Hey, how you doing? I was just trying to add a link to Vishin Factory to put it in the chat there. So you caught me off guard. Hi everyone, I'm Connor. I've worked in circularity for around like 10 years or so in-house at different companies. And then about 1.5 years ago, I decided to go independent. So I'm essentially, all the brands are thinking, what's this big circular thing? Where do I start? I help with them. I help them create their strategy. Could be about going with repair first. It could be rental. It could be about the design parts that Carmen was saying is, it doesn't matter if it's, can be recycled if it can be recycled at the end, great, but way better to start with design, and the materials you put into that product is much more impactful. So that's what I do, but then I also teach circularity and really help as many people as I can, inspire them about the opportunity. It's not just about the environment, there's a huge business opportunity as well. So I think that's really important part as well. Thanks.
Amazing, thank you. So many questions already, but I'm going to hold back and carry on with the introductions. Paul, please.
Hi there, guys. Lovely to be a part of this panel. So yeah, my name is Paul, and I'm the founder of a company called Umelia. Three-sided cube help us build an app called Pack Points recently, which is all to do with the circular economy in the hospitality sector. So I worked in hospitality for quite some time. And one of the things we used to have leaderboards for turnover against all the businesses, leaderboards for profit, leaderboards for customer satisfaction. But we wanted to create leaderboards and a point system for sustainability to help engagement, help drive that kind of powerful message. And obviously with that becoming a massive key goal for all these businesses, it helps drive that engagement massively. So yeah, we look at Pack Points specifically looks at the circular economy of packaging. And one of my things was wondering why I was going to see a driver again in 2 days' time and he wasn't going to take back the packaging he just dropped off. So we engaged the suppliers and the businesses together to be able to sort of unleash that circular economy within the industry itself. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, Chrissy.
Hi, my name is Cressy. I'm the co-founder of Elvis and Cressy. We essentially do three things. We rescue materials that would otherwise go to landfill. We turn them into a range of bags, belts, and wallets, and then we donate 50% of the profits to charity. So the line we're probably the most famous for is that we collect all of London's decommissioned fire hoses, make bags and belts out of that, and then half of the money goes to the firefighters charity. And there's a little furry creature next to me who's very needy. So if you see his hair, that's Monty.
Love it. No, it's wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, I'm in awe of all of you to start with. I mean, it's fantastic to be able to have an opportunity to discuss this all with you. As a first kind of question, obviously, Carmen and Rich are on the panel as well. Everyone has been introduced to them, but kind of as a starting point to kind of feed off what we've discussed in that introduction with ourselves and Carmen, it would just be good to whiz around quickly. I think some of you have begun to speak about it already in your introductions, but just a little bit more about what does the circular economy mean to you in your particular industry, business, and kind of sector? Because I think there's some really interesting differences and similarities with what you're all doing that will make a really interesting discussion point. Joey, as you kicked us off, could you perhaps start us off again?
Okay, so the circular economy to me, Carmen touched on it before. There's so many great technology incentives out there, but there's a huge social awareness that needs to change as well. And to me, circularity is a form of consciousness. It's a mindset, it's a way of thinking. And for us to achieve anything in this new world, it all starts with the individual, and it starts in shifting that mindset. So to me, it's about getting into that mindset quite quickly on, and that's the place to start holistically. For me as a business, I quit my job as a designer to start a factory in China, and quickly on, I was like, here I am running a business that has the capacity to produce 100,000 to 200,000 bags, and I'm just like, the world doesn't need that right now. And my manufacturing to date is a very, very heavily linear model. And for me, I started challenging how I can start to make nothing, but be able to make money still. And then this is when I started studying the circular economy and started seeing ways for us as a business to kind of stay profitable by not making as many products. And I'll touch on that later on.
I think that's really powerful. And I love that it's a mindset. I think that's a really fabulous way to start off with that. In terms of Connor, for you, particularly where you've worked with so many different brands at presumably different stages in their journey with what the circular economy means to them, for you, does it have a similar meaning, a different meaning for your particular business?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think, the reason we're here is because we've got all this overproduction. So the brands are massively guilty of that. The brands are also guilty for all the marketing they put out. So they, get people to think that they need things and want things, where, that's creating this overconsumption. And because of all the marketing that goes on, we are underutilizing all the things we have as well. So utilization has gone down so much. So all that disposability, exactly like as Joey's saying, it's a mindset thing, it's a behavior change thing. So there's a lot that needs to be done with brands to educate the consumers as well. But for me, like, circular economy is just about fairness in a really, really simple sense. We're all here for a tiny, tiny moment. And if we continue to decorate the world with all our crap of old fridges and old clothes, like, how is that fair to future generations? So we need to become, circular in this moment right now. Otherwise, it's not fair at all. And everyone that comes after us, whether it be animals, plants, whatever it might be. So for me, it's about fairness and living within the limitations, not only of our resources, but the time we're here as well.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Incredible. I'm loving all these themes that are coming through. And Cressy, just to skip to you on that respect, as a business owner and as someone that holds sustainability truly at the heart of everything, is that similar to you? Do you have the same sort of experiences, or is it slightly different in how your business was sort of originated?
It is. I mean, it's certainly, when we started, Ellen was still sailing, so there wasn't an Ellen MacArthur Foundation. But for us, we just looked at the luxury industry as one that had structurally failed. We thought that it was failing people, it was failing the planet. We looked at so many industries. If you look at it from the environmental and the social lens, you're like, we are surrounded. I mean, Connor says crap. I just looked at it as a complete failure everywhere. And when we saw the fire hose, we thought, well, how do we start from that problem and turn that into something that can solve everything? And let's not have a tiny amount of ambition. And that's why I like how Joy was saying it's a mindset, because to me, it's every single decision that you take. And of course, you can't do that unless it is your mindset. So for us, it wasn't enough to rescue the fire hose. It wasn't enough to disrupt the luxury industry and to call out its failures for what they were. It isn't enough to be a living wage employer. It isn't enough to donate 50% of our profits to charity. It isn't enough. It's never enough, because I grew up seeing moose in the wild, and these are debts I'll never repay. During the pandemic, we designed a solar powered micro forge so that we can collect aluminium, turn it into hardware, and only use the power of the sun. But that's only enough for me if everyone has the design for that technology and can iterate on it. Because what's the point of IP if we're all going to die because of climate change and biodiversity loss? So I think it's every single decision you take, and it's never enough. And yeah, what else did we do in the pandemic? We moved to a farm so that we could start a regenerative agriculture project, so that we could understand how to capture and sequester carbon into the soil, how we treat our own sewage. I literally, in the last 6 months, we built the most beautiful sewage treatment system in the world. It only uses gravity and tiger worms. And we had we had our local MP visit. She was one of the MPs that voted to keep putting shit in the rivers. And she had nothing to say. I said, this is the most beautiful sewage treatment system in the world. And she just looked at it. It is everything that you do. And it's never going to be enough. But that's almost the excitement and the joy and the point of all of this is that actually saving the world means you have to do it with every single fiber of your being, every moment of the day. And you're never going to succeed on your own, which is why we're all here chatting and collaborating and sharing ideas.
Can I just ask, Chris, sorry to interrupt there really quickly. Where do you find that intrinsic kind of motivation? I think that's what we struggle really, in my industry, is finding that real motivation, that drive. So that seems like obviously you have that, you went out your way to do those sort of things. Has that come from something in the past? Is that just something you've had?
It literally comes from having seen a moose in the wild. I grew up in Western Canada, and I took I took big nature really for granted. I thought everyone had that. I thought that was everyone's life. Then I got a scholarship to finish high school in Hong Kong. So when I was 16, I just moved to Hong Kong by myself. And I learned that they don't treat their sewage. You know, at the time, there's 13 million people there, 7 million people's sewage just went into the sea. And from that moment on, I was like, I'm not having it.
Yeah.
So it comes from being pissed off, like I spent half my time being pissed off, but then the other half of my time going like, oh, what are we gonna do about it? So yeah, it's
you got to see that, I guess, and a lot of people might not have that ability. We live in our bubbles a lot of the time. So going back to the original question, you know, what does it mean to me? Like my industry, particularly in hospitality, we work with either low-skilled workers, or we work with people who are on minimum wage. We work with a very high turnover rate of staff. So it's very difficult to get these people to care within that industry. You know, it can often be students. It can often be, you know, people that are just in and out the door very quickly. So, you know, trying to get people to motivate them to be a part of this circular economy can be quite difficult. That's just why I asked that sort of intrinsic, where you get to summon your own reasons for doing something. And I think we've talked about before that, you know, realistically, motivation, convenience, and cost are your three sort of reasons for getting involved in something. And I think realistically, though, that motivation is the base of the two pillars. I think people are great when they're motivated, like you sound it there. And actually, we will go out our way. It doesn't matter about the cost and the convenience when we're motivated, because we will go out our way, and we're great. People are great at achieving things when they have that. So it's finding that real motivation, getting someone to summon their own reasons for doing something.
Yeah.
If I may interject, like what Cressy said really resonated. And I think, you know, it brought to mind the words of Bill McKibben, who was one of my idols. And you know, who recommended, I guess, because he got approached a lot with the question of like, what can I do as an individual? And his answer was, be less of an individual. You need a critical mass of people to do what you're doing. You need a movement. And that's kind of what we're trying to bring about at the foundation, really, is we need, you know, a critical mass of actors, of people, of organizations, of governments, of companies to get on board and actually commit to this.
It was quite interesting. We did and this isn't a shameless plug at all, I promise you, but as part of Ignite, we did a podcast series recently where we spoke to 8 different people within the world of sustainability, from brands to policymakers to all kinds of different sort of people, and it really interesting. But one of the key things we said, because one of the questions we had is, okay, what advice would you give to an individual, what they can do tomorrow to make a real difference? And I don't think it was quite all of them, but a good 80% of them said protest. That is the number one thing you can do at the moment, is protest. Voting takes too long. Yeah, we haven't got time for voting. You need to get out and shout, because it needs to be bottom up, absolutely, but really it needs to be top down as well. So Cressy, that the story of your local MP coming and looking at and having nothing to say, you should have thrown her in.
Yeah, certainly not at the clean end at the beginning.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
Love it. Well, just to stop it getting any more aggressive, I'm gonna take it in. Otherwise, carnage will break loose with such a passionate panel. But I think it's really interesting to start at that and to kind of share that passion with everyone as to why this is so important as a topic. I think just an area that's interesting to cover, and I have seen we've got questions coming through that relate to it already, is just what are the main challenges stopping the effective implementation of circular economy? And that might be from like a personal experience, you know, as business owners, as people working in this industry, what are those challenges you perceive, but also the challenges you've experienced with kind of, like I say, effective implementation and take up of it. So I think if I'm conscious of time, there is a particular question that's come through, which is specific around the challenges of raising capital for a business. So if we can just kick that around a bit and see if that's something we can add some value to. Cressy, you were nodding your head then, so I'm going to hand over to you to start us off.
Yeah, I mean, my first job was in venture capital, so I run a mile from investors. But there's a couple of things. What's really fascinating with the circular economy is that I would say there's more money available for it now than there ever has been. And there's more money to do good things right now than there are good projects. So really, if you're raising money, now is the time to do it. But the other thing that you have to really bear in mind is that we had some proto investors early on, and a lot of them, that what they hesitated on was our 50% profit donation, not the circularity stuff we were doing. It was the fact that we want to reinvent capitalism as well, because I don't want to have a circular economy if it's just going to have more Jeff Bezoses at the top of it. I just don't. I don't think we should cut and paste the crappy elements of capitalism onto a brand new, wonderful, utopian circular economy. So yes, raise money, yeah, definitely, but be careful about who you partner with, because we can't just have a circular economy that has linear flows of capital. Capital has to be circular too.
I think that's really interesting. And it kind of relates back to Common, what you were saying about that responsibility element. I think there is that kind of, if you're taking action towards it, being holistically responsible and thinking about the impact of every kind of part that you take, which I think is really powerful. Connor, in terms of your kind of challenges that you've seen, interestingly, like from the big brand, I know you've worked with larger brands, like, is it I can't imagine it's so much the capital side. Is it different challenges? Like what kind of thing have you experienced?
Yeah, sure thing. I think the question before there was like, who owns the business or who are your investors is really, really important. And just one thing that I think is amazing, and it's been around for ages, but like crowdfunder and Kickstarter, like that's the way to raise money there. And I know it works better for startups and things like that. But Petit Pli, I invested in it like a small amount of money, but like they went like something like 500% over what they wanted to do, because their story is so good. And if anyone doesn't know, it's clothes that grow as your baby gets bigger. It's simple as that, but they're really good quality as well. So I think that's a really good way. And from a marketing and consumer point of view, you really feel invested in them, and you can test and trial the products. So you get a really strong community around your brand's values. So that's easier for the smaller end. If you're at that very other end of a big brand, then you really need to get people invested in the change management quite early on. And that can be internal pop-ups and pilots to get people to understand it hands-on. But you need to think about what the KPIs are of your circular initiative. So if it's about doing a vintage trial or a repair trial, it's like, okay, it might not always be straight economical KPIs. Sometimes it's going to be footfall drivers, it's going to be PR, it's going to be all these other things, because you're not going to have commercial return necessarily in year one. It's other things. So if you start rental, actually, if you get people wearing that product multiple times in a short period, that data is actually really good to feed back to your designers and how you can make products better quality, longer lasting. So I think it's a different framing sometimes. It's not just about, is this going to make money for us? Think about much broader KPIs and how circularity can be a win for your business. And I think that's where brands have a really strong opportunity. Unlike some, I'm not going to name names here, but some people who are really
name them.
I don't know, like Primark or whatever. It's not a brand. Like people will love certain fast fashion and things like this, but really that's where brands have a really strong connection of who that brand is and what they do. And they can connect people. And, you go to a Levi's store and you feel like you're in the Levi's club. Yeah. You go there and they're repairing your jeans and stuff. There's something there. And I think circular economy and brands can have a really nice partnership whereby other people who are just big volume, low margin, it's going to be more difficult for them to play in that space.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Paul, just to switch to you from like a different angle, obviously Pack Points is fairly new, solving a real problem to you, a problem you experienced yourself. What were the challenges you experienced, or that you perhaps are still experiencing now?
Is this for raising equity, or for raising capital, or just in general?
There is that capital question, but I think just generally getting a sense of what it was. I know you mentioned earlier about motivation. I think
sense. Yeah, obviously behavioral change is always going to be difficult. You know, getting someone to do something they've never sort of done before, you've got to intrinsically motivate them so that they summon their own reasons for doing that. You know, so we kind of looked at that behavioral side of it. You know, for me as a general manager of a business, you know, running a hotel, I was always pushed by those leaderboards. I was always pushed by, you know, that kind of, I didn't want to sit in an area meeting and be at the bottom of that leaderboard. There is nothing worse. It's, you know, it's horrible, it's awkward. So, you know, how could we do that for sustainability? How could we get people to take part in that? So those leaderboards were there on the site side of things, for, you know, that general manager to take part in that, and the staff to have a look at that leaderboard of how they're performing against other pubs that they know, other restaurants they know, you know, and you all sit there competing against each other. Kind of got the colleges of Oxford University jumping on board, so each college can challenge each other as well. So that sort of intrinsic motivation was really big. And then from the supplier side of it, it was about putting those drivers on a leaderboard as well, or, you know, showing actually, you know, giving them locations and cost value of how much of their packaging is left out there. You know, they're intrinsically driven by costs. You know, those drivers don't necessarily care, but I tell you what, if they can have some form of leaderboard and see where they are against the other driver, then they're actually quite interested in that. So Tesco actually use an app called Lightfoot for their drivers, which is like a logistics app. And it basically gamifies how quick you're driving and how much fuel you're burning. And it's as simple as that. And basically, it just tries to improve their logistics, but it gamifies it for the drivers. So, you know, that overcoming those behavioral changes is really, really difficult. But if you can find out what kind of motivates through, whether it's, you know, questionnaires or actually being a part of the problem originally, and finding out what, you know, influences yourself, then, you know, you might be able to put something together at either end to be able to influence people in that way. So yeah, that's kind of how we arrived at what we're doing.
Incredible, thank you. And Joey, obviously you've had quite an interesting journey from designer to your own factory. In terms of the challenges, I can imagine there was a few. What kind of are the main challenges that you could share with us today?
So just quickly on the investment question, similar to Cressy, I run a million miles away from investors. That culture is so broken, and Connor answered the question perfectly. Lean into your community, go through Kickstarters, go through crowdfunding, get people that want to back your company and support you from your network that believe in you. And that's a route that we're going to be going down in the next couple of years to raise some quite serious capital, because I believe in my network and the power of it. The catch-22s to everything for us right now is, as I said, our goal is to start producing less, but still be able to be profitable. By producing less and being a manufacturer, that means people that work for us, we're going to have to kind of reduce the amount of labor force. And from a social perspective, in many regions of the world, manufacturing and the linear economy gives people jobs. So if we start producing less, we have to take into consideration the people at the bottom of the pyramid who are going to be losing work from it. So that's something that we have to be mindful about, especially in manufacturing. And again, if we can make revenue through digital fashion and through blockchain, maybe that's a way to still support the workers still working in the factory. So that's one of the big catch-22s early on is removing those jobs, but replacing them with something else, especially in the manufacturing industry in countries like India, Bangladesh, China, that are so reliant on these services. The second thing is for us, we have one eye on blockchain and the metaverse and moving our business into those models and to support it. The catch-22 of blockchain is the energy required and the carbon emissions that come from blockchain technology. In the fashion sector, it's an incredibly powerful tool to slow down the industry. But generally speaking, the metaverse is extremely scary. And blockchain, if it's not done in moderation, will just create another problem by the carbon coming from that side of it. So these are the things we need to be mindful about. And again, it's about consciousness. It's about, if we're going to start using blockchain, don't use it in excess. Find ways of planting trees or carbon emissions from your blockchain usage. So these are the catch-22s early on for us. These are the stepping stones that we're taking to kind of slow down fashion. But as we talked about at the beginning, there's always going to be consequences. And when you're conscious, you're going to try and tackle and find balance to the problems.
I think that's really interesting, and it leads nicely into that question that would like to pose to you, but conscious of time, that it needs to be quite quick, around how technology and innovation can support, because I think, we have focused on that responsibility. I think Carmen shared some really lovely examples of how, technology is being utilised for good in this space. So it would be really great to hear a bit more, to build on what Joey's been saying about how particularly he's looking at that space. We have also had a question around, aside from supply chain solutions, what are the key tech enablers needed to advance circular manufacturing? So that might be something, Joey, again, that we can whiz back to you to answer after that. So I think just, some quick thoughts from the panelists around how can technology and innovation support the circular economy. Would anyone like to volunteer to have a...
Sure, I can just jump in, because it's kind of the answer to what I was talking about with the problems. So for us, the next step is to start producing less. And through blockchain, what we can do there is a few different routes. The first thing is tokenizing the actual physical product. And by doing this, when it goes through the blockchain and it goes through these incentives, when that product goes into the brand who designs it can go into a renting model or a swapping model, and every time that product changes hands, there'll be a royalty attached to that transaction, and us as a manufacturer, we will get a royalty from every time the consumer swaps the goods. And what that would do is, for us, would be that the production that we're making, it isn't finished when it leaves the door. We're still making some money on that production staying in circularity. So for us, the incentive is to ensure that we're making long-lasting, durable product that's staying in circulation for our clients and the brands who are selling it. And then that will give us a new revenue stream from pre-existing production. So over the course of 10, 20, 50 years, if our production from 20 years ago is still staying in circularity, and we can still be rewarded for that, and that will create a revenue stream that will support us by not making anything. The next thing is digital fashion. So for brands starting now is to really think about producing digitally first. And what that can do is, say you produce 3 bags, black, blue, and green, you can put those into the metaverse. You can put them digitally first, start selling them, and then find out what's trending first without even making anything. And then when you come to make something, you can come to us as a factory and say, we want to produce black. This means that our clients, when they're producing with us, they're going to go a little bit deeper in the volumes because they know they're going to be able to sell those products. Right now, with manufacturing, brands produce so much, then they have dead stock and they have stuff that they can't sell. So digital fashion and the metaverse is a way to really start to slow down the industry, build trends, build hype, and then produce it physically.
I think that's really interesting. There's 2 solutions there. I think I love it's probably the only sensible use of blockchain I've heard that actually makes sense, particularly, and I still don't think you need a blockchain to do it, but that's really interesting thing, that you can retain the value in the item. The longer it lives, the more that you get paid for that, which makes sense and is the right thing to do, because it removes any idea of obsolescence. Is a really kind of key. I think that's definitely something that's fascinating. I think the metaverse thing is really interesting, particularly for fashion. We spoke recently to, and the name of the person completely skips my mind now, but I can't remember the fabricant, the guys that sold the $10,000 dress that's just virtual, and it's sort of. And this was kind of before metaversey chat was kind of more mainstream. We were thinking more about, well, what do? Use it on your social channels? That's ridiculous. As soon as if you've used the metaverse and put a headset on and been weirded out by VR chat or anything, you see that it's a kind of, wow, actually, that makes perfect sense now. I totally understand digital fashion. I guess the question back is, you don't need to produce anything then. You can just live it virtually, but that's maybe further down the line.
Just quickly, back to blockchain. One of the beautiful things about blockchain is the radical transparency from it. So just outside of the circular economy, what it can do is it can bring transparency to the factory, to the material supplier. When you scan that QR code, it will show the factory in China. It will show that the supply chain, and that's one thing that is just like a brilliant, beautiful thing.
Well, it might. I kind of disagree, Joey. Like, it might show that, unless the people who put that QR code onto the blockchain were lying. And unfortunately, we're in a world filled with people who lie all the time. Am I going to trust Primark's QR codes? Am I going to trust stuff Primark put on the blockchain? I mean,
this is it. We have to always peel back more layers and layers and layers. We can't rely on one thing. We can't rely on a certification or an audit. We have to go deeper and literally go into the factory. Obviously, the consumer can't do that.
I think you're right, and I think conceptually, conceptually, the idea of what blockchain can bring through transparency and immutability and all of that kind of stuff is conceptually fantastic. I just personally think blockchain is an awful implementation of it. It's kind of crazy. He's going to use, but God, I don't want to get into a blockchain.
To avoid
never be able to go on Twitter again.
Going into a full talk on the blockchain, I am going to start focusing on some of the questions that have come through, conscious of time, just pinging these around to you guys on the call. So a question to Connor and all the panelists. I'm a brand strategist myself, as an ESG have become corporate's hot topics. Many of our clients wanted to jump onto the sustainability wagon, and almost all of them have recycling campaign or plant a tree campaign or pledge to related NGO like WWF. So the question is, how can we convince corporates to look into circular economy? Because the challenge is always they don't know how to do, as working with suppliers or change their business models can be quite challenging to do that, and how to balance between cost and revenue. So Connor, that may be one for you. Your name was mentioned.
Yeah. I'm looking at the time. Like, it's not a 2-minute answer, but like some highlights would be like, you're going to be an innovator. If you stand still, you're going to get left behind in the next couple of years, particularly if you're producing a product. You get a much stronger connection to your consumers. So we talked about that community element, and that's going to get stronger. The opportunity to have your own resale, you get a second margin on the product. If you're getting your own product back and you have recycling partners, you can protect yourself from commodity fluctuations. There's so many things there. Those are just a tiny, that's like 5% of it. But whoever asked the question, just find me on LinkedIn and happy to explore that further. The one thing is every brand is totally unique. So what I would say to Burberry to do is going to be very different to a Gucci or a Marks and Spencer's or a Nike, and even different cities or countries. The solution is going to be different because those consumers use that product in a very different way. So it's going to be really bespoke, and there's no like copy and paste. You got to find out their product, their materials, how it's used, what's the life cycle, all of that stuff, to really find out what is the best circular starting point for them, and then what follows afterwards. And again, we've talked it here, like no brand will do it by themselves. It's part of this huge, big ecosystem of lots of different partners. Who's the best repair? Who's the best rental? And all that gels together to create the circular economy.
That's great. And thank you. I really would recommend anyone reaches out to our panelists. They are all fantastic, and I'm sure they will answer questions outside of this as well. Super conscious of how long I can steal them for, so I'm going to keep on going. We've got a question here from Tim. I would like to ask about legal frameworks that could support the move to a circular economy. For example, UK right to repair regulations and EU common interfaces for devices. I don't know if anybody kind of has that sort of more framework and legal kind of understanding and would like to take that.
I mean, those are good. Those are good, those two. But also we've got some really amazing ones, like the Green Claims Code that's come into action here. So a lot of the brands that have been, 2% of what they do is good, but they're using that to say that all of what they're doing is good. They won't be able to do that anymore because it will be illegal. So that's actually a fantastic legal structure that's coming to play. And people in marketing need to be aware that they can't just fib or, exaggerate the good green things that they do. That's a wonderful one. The Better Business Act is probably really amazing, which is something that everyone who's on here should campaign for, because If we got every business in the UK to sign up for the fact that they would effectively cause no harm to the people or the planet as a byproduct of their business, we change the game overnight. So there are certain legal frameworks that we've got that are really, yes, right to repair is absolutely spectacular. Extended producer responsibility is something that the government keeps saying they're going to do and has kept failing they do. But a great example of it would be cigarette companies. They do not currently do anything towards the mitigation of cigarette butt waste in the world. It is the single most littered item in the UK and the most toxic. If we had EPR legislation, which they keep threatening to have, cigarette companies would be responsible for getting that stuff out of the environment. That would be an amazing piece of legislation. So there's a lot of weapons that we've got and a lot of weapons that we're not using. Modern slavery, we've got great legislation. We're not using it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, very few things would come into this country from certain parts of China.
It's very interesting. And I think, when we do talk about this topic, it's very, very clear that it requires an element of regulation as well. And that drive that regulation can have towards pushing people to kind of behave more responsibly, and that push that people need to do it is really powerful. And what's out there at the moment that's working, and it's really interesting to highlight the things that aren't necessarily working or things that people didn't know about. So thank you so much for answering that. We do have a few more. If panelists do need to leave, like, I won't hate you forever. I do understand that we're over time. So please don't feel like you've got to sit there and worry if you do need to go. But I am going to rattle through a few more of these. And then, unfortunately, I am going to have to round things off. But please do email any questions across to us that you have. And I'm sure I can navigate through to our panelists and they will get them answered. So one more here links very much to what you were saying, Carmen. I'd be very interested to hear everyone's perspective of when the circular economy would simply become the norm. So very much linking to what you were saying, Carmen, around the future and what that could look like, and when it just becomes the economy as we know it. Do we have kind of like a time on that? Are we driving towards when we think that could be? Do we want to make it today?
I don't have a crystal ball any more than the next person. So here it's a matter of like how committed companies, especially big companies and policymakers, but also, of course, startups and other organizations are to taking immediate action now. And, there was a question earlier around how do you convince brands? And to me, it's like, my question is actually, why do they see it as an option instead of an obligation at this stage? Like, it's not really an option to continue to be this wasteful anymore. But I think probably the climate crisis offers an interesting parallel. And there are some, really important connections there between the circular economy and emissions. So I would watch this space in the next decade to see if we manage to stay on course for net zero by 2030 and halve our emissions. I think that certain things are very easy to address, and there are, of course, obvious industrial challenges to transition to a circular economy, so we don't deny those. But there are some low-hanging fruit there that need to be addressed ASAP. Also, in answer to John's question, John Barlow, he asked a couple of times about ocean plastic. And I just wanted to say that, of course, super important to address ocean plastic, but just kind of taking a systems perspective, the reality is that, the biggest killer of fish and marine life is actually the fishing industry. It's also an important plastic polluter. My point is not to say that it's good to litter ocean in plastic, and we absolutely need to address that issue. But we also need to kind of look a little more holistically at what we're doing to our oceans.
Amazing. Thank you so much for highlighting that for us. We do have one here from Patricia, which says, don't you think that rather than protesting, we should focus on educating, helping, nudging the customers to adjust their consumer habits? I mean, protests do bring a lot of too much black and white picture, polarizing even more views, and are counterproductive. I think in terms of what we're always saying in these things is a holistic approach is what I would say. I think definitely in terms of everything that the panelists have kind of highlighted today, there's a huge element of education, a huge element of nudging, and that behavior change element to help people understand what's available and how they can act more responsibly. I think in terms of the protesting element is a really interesting outcome from our podcast. I would definitely encourage people to go and check out those podcasts. I think a few of the panelists were actually guests on those podcasts and shared some really interesting insights, and that is can be found on our website. Unfortunately, I am gonna have to wrap up today, and the reason why is because I think I could talk to all of these wonderful people for way too long than they would allow me to, and I will end up just carrying on forever. I think one thing I would like to just say really quickly is that what's become really clear when we talk about these particular topics is how much there is to talk about. So please do watch this space. I think there's some further conversations, some further events, some smaller kind of conversations that I think we should really continue. We'll look into blogs and kind of capturing some of the wonderful kind of information that our panelists have been sharing, so we can make sure we can get that across to everyone and keep that conversation, this really important conversation, going for everyone. So please do watch this space. Just last thing from me is just to highlight that we are here and we are here to support people. So if you do have anything you wish to kind of share with us, or any particular projects or areas you want to reach out to find out more information about, please do reach out. You can get me on LinkedIn or email us at Three Sided Cube website. One last thing is just to mention our next Tech for Good talk is on the 1st of March, and it's a really amazing topic, one close to my heart, which is on women in tech. So please do join us for that. Details will be out shortly.